The first time my neighbor used my driveway, I honestly didn't think twice about it. I was out front trimming hedges, sweating through an old Tennessee Volunteers t-shirt, and this dark blue Tahoe just backed halfway into my driveway, cranked the wheel, and rolled back out onto the street like it was nothing. The guy behind the wheel gave me this little two-finger wave like, "Appreciate it, buddy," and that was that. Normal suburban stuff. At least that's what I thought. Funny how a lot of problems start exactly like that, small enough to ignore. See, I'd only been living in that house for about 5 years at the time. Quiet neighborhood outside Asheville, North Carolina. Mostly retirees, a few younger families, everybody pretending to be friendly while secretly tracking each other's property lines like Cold War borders. You know the type. My neighbor across the street was a guy named Randall Pike. Mid-60s. Always wore golf polos even though nobody had ever seen him play golf. Drove around like he personally funded the paving of every road in town. The kind of man who acted like confidence was the same thing as being correct. At first, Randall only used my driveway once every week or two. Then it became every other day. Then every day. Then sometimes twice a day. And after a while, it wasn't even just Randall anymore. His daughter started doing it in her white Lexus. His son-in-law in this loud diesel truck. Delivery vans. Landscaping trailers. One afternoon, I watched an Amazon driver whip into my driveway, so fast he nearly flattened one of my flower pots. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not anger exactly. More like the slow realization that people will keep taking space from you until you finally say no. And the crazy part was, I kept trying to rationalize it. I'd sit there at night in my living room hearing tires crunch over the edge of my gravel and think, it's not worth starting drama over. But every single time headlights swept through my front windows at dinner, it felt like somebody walking into your house without knocking. Tiny violation. Over and over. One Saturday morning, my sister Claire came over with her kids, and while we were unloading groceries, Randall backed into the driveway again, came within maybe 2 feet of Claire's minivan. She jumped and yelled, "Jesus Christ." Randall just laughed through the open window. "Didn't see you there." Didn't even slow down. My nephew Tyler looked at me and goes, "Does that guy think he owns your driveway?" Everybody laughed, but I didn't. Because honestly, it kind of felt like he did. That night, I stood at the kitchen sink staring out the window at the driveway I'd paid $12,000 to install after renovating the property. Before I bought the place, it was just grass and dirt. I still remembered the construction crew pouring concrete in the rain while I handed out coffee like some exhausted foreman pretending to know what he was doing. That driveway mattered to me because I built that home from almost nothing after my divorce. Every overtime shift, every sacrificed weekend, every cheap frozen dinner while trying to save money. It all ended up right there in that little piece of concrete. Which is probably why Randall's attitude got under my skin more than I wanted to admit. A few days later, I finally caught him pulling his usual turnaround move around Sunset. I walked down to the curb and held my hand up. "Hey Randall, can I ask you something?" He leaned his elbow out the window, already smirking. "What's up, Caleb? Would you mind not using the driveway to turn around anymore?" I said it calmly, honestly trying to keep things neighborly. I've had a couple close calls lately. He stared at me for a second like I'd just told him breathing required a permit. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on, man. It's 10 feet of concrete. It's private property." "Yeah," he said, grinning wider now. "Well, people use it. That's what happens in neighborhoods." Then he shrugged and added the line that really stuck with me. "You can't be one of those guys, Caleb. One of those guys." Funny thing is, people always say that right before they justify disrespecting you. I remember standing there in the fading sunlight watching his Tahoe disappear down the street, and for the first time since moving into that neighborhood, I realized this wasn't actually about a driveway anymore. It was about boundaries, and Randall had spent years convincing himself mine didn't matter. For the next couple weeks, I tried convincing myself the conversation had worked. Honestly, I wanted it to work. I'm not one of those people who enjoys neighborhood wars. I don't sit behind blinds spying on people or measuring fence lines with a ruler. I work long hours, keep my grass cut, wave when appropriate, and generally try not to become the topic of somebody's HOA Facebook rant. But Randall had this way of hearing "please stop" as challenge accepted. 2 days after our conversation, I woke up around 6:30 to the sound of a diesel engine rattling outside my bedroom window. I pulled the curtain back and there was a landscaping trailer jackknifed halfway into my driveway, while some kid wearing earbuds tried to maneuver out of it. The trailer wheels chewed straight through the edge of my lawn like a rototiller. I walked outside in sweatpants and said, "Hey, man, this is private." The kid pointed across the street. Mr. Pike said everybody uses it. Everybody. That word again. It spread through the neighborhood like Randall had granted public access to my property himself. And what really got to me wasn't even the driveway anymore. It was the entitlement. That casual assumption that because I wasn't screaming, I must be okay with it. There's something weird that happens when you're too patient with people. They stop seeing your patience as kindness and start seeing it as permission. So finally, after another week of headlights flashing through my living room during dinner, I ordered a simple black aluminum sign online. Private driveway. No turnaround. That was it. No threats. No profanity. No giant red letters. Just a boundary written politely enough that any reasonable adult should have understood it. The sign went up on a Thursday afternoon. And weirdly, it worked. Friday passed. Nothing. Saturday morning, peaceful. By Sunday, I actually caught myself enjoying coffee on the porch again instead of monitoring traffic like some unpaid crossing guard. But peace has a funny way of making you forget how irrational certain people can be. About 2 weeks later, I came home from work and found a silver Mercedes parked in front of my house. Guy in a charcoal suit standing at my front door holding a manila envelope. The second I saw him, my stomach dropped. Because nobody in America ever receives good news from a man carrying paperwork. He asked, "Caleb Mercer?" I said yes. He handed me the envelope and said, "You've been served." Then he walked away like he was dropping off takeout. I stood there in my driveway, staring at legal documents while Randall watered his lawn across the street pretending not to watch me. That part still makes me laugh, honestly. The man was holding a garden hose aimed at absolutely nothing, just waiting for my reaction like he was watching season finale television. I opened the paperwork inside my kitchen and thought I was misunderstanding it at first. Randall was suing me, not for damages to his car, not because of some accident. No, he was claiming I had illegally blocked access to a historically established turnaround easement that he and previous residents had supposedly used for over a decade. He demanded I remove the sign, restore unrestricted access, and compensate him for loss of convenience and emotional distress. Emotional distress. Because he couldn't cut through somebody else's property anymore. I actually laughed out loud reading that. Then I kept reading and stopped laughing. Because once you see official court documents with your name on them, even stupid claims start feeling dangerous. There's something deeply unsettling about realizing another person is willing to weaponize the legal system simply because they don't like hearing the word no. That night, I barely slept. I kept pacing around the house replaying every interaction I'd had with Randall since moving there. Looking back, the signs were probably always there. The passive-aggressive comments whenever I upgraded something on the property. The way he'd mention how things have always been done around here anytime somebody new moved in. He hated change, but more than that, I think he hated losing invisible authority. Guys like Randall build entire identities around controlling little social ecosystems. The neighborhood barbecue organizer, the unofficial street expert, the man who decides what's acceptable. And the second someone challenges that, it becomes personal. The next morning I called an attorney named Denise Holloway. Mid-50s, sharp as broken glass, former litigator from Charlotte who had absolutely no patience for nonsense. I brought her the paperwork, and halfway through reading it she lowered the pages and just blinked at me slowly. "He's suing you," she said carefully, "for preventing him from trespassing." Pretty much. Denise leaned back in her chair. Well, that's ambitious. Over the next week, Denise and I started digging into everything. Property records, county maps, old permits. We requested archived aerial imagery from the city planning office. And that's when the entire thing started falling apart in the funniest possible way. See, Randall's entire argument depended on him proving long-term historical use of the driveway. Problem was, the driveway itself didn't exist until 4 years earlier. Before my renovation, the entire side yard was grass. Uneven grass, too. You couldn't have driven a bicycle across it comfortably, let alone established some mythical legal roadway. Denise nearly spit out her coffee when the first aerial photo came up on her computer screen. "Oh, this is beautiful," she said. Year after year appeared on the monitor. Green lawn, green lawn, green lawn, then construction equipment, then finally the concrete driveway. It was like watching Randall's lawsuit self-destruct frame by frame. But Denise warned me not to get cocky. People like this rarely back down gracefully, she said, especially once ego gets involved. She turned out to be right. A few days before the hearing, Randall cornered me outside my mailbox. He walked over smiling like we were discussing football scores instead of an active lawsuit. You know, he said casually, we could still settle this without embarrassing ourselves in court. Ourselves? I said, Randall, you sued me. He shrugged. You put up the sign. I remember staring at him thinking how bizarre it was that he genuinely saw himself as the victim here. Like my refusal to surrender my property somehow justified everything he'd done afterward. Then he leaned a little closer and lowered his voice. People around here don't like difficult neighbors. There it was. Not really a threat. More like social blackmail. Fall in line or become the outsider. I smiled and said something that clearly irritated him more than yelling ever could have. Good thing this isn't a popularity contest then. His expression changed immediately. The fake friendliness disappeared, and for a split second I saw exactly who he was underneath all the golf polos and neighborhood cookout charm. Somebody who'd gone through life assuming confidence alone could bend reality. And maybe most of the time it had. But facts are stubborn things. And in 3 days, facts were waiting for him in court. The hearing took place on a rainy Thursday morning in a small county courthouse that smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. Denise met me outside carrying 2 folders and wearing the kind of expression surgeons probably wear before routine operations. Calm, focused, slightly annoyed somebody wasted their time getting there. Meanwhile, Randall showed up looking weirdly confident, like he was about to close a business deal instead of explain to a judge why he believed he deserved access to somebody else's property forever. He even nodded at me on the way in. That smug little nod people do when they think they've already won. And honestly, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. Because courtrooms have a way of making normal people feel guilty even when they've done nothing wrong. You sit there surrounded by legal language and polished shoes, and suddenly your own life feels like evidence. The hearing itself started quietly enough. The judge, Harold Bennett, looked to be about 70 years old, silver hair, glasses low on his nose, the kind of man who probably lost patience with human stupidity sometime during the Clinton administration. Randall's attorney went first and immediately launched into this dramatic speech about customary neighborhood access and historical reliance. Listening to it felt surreal. They talked about my driveway like it was some ancient trade route villagers depended on for survival. Then Randall himself took the stand. And this man actually pointed toward me and said, he moved into the neighborhood and started acting like he owns everything. I almost laughed. Denise just lightly touched my arm without even looking at me, basically courtroom language for don't you dare. The judge asked Randall, how long exactly have you been using this driveway? Randall straightened in his chair. At least 10 years, Your Honor. Everybody on this street knows that. 10 years. He said it proudly too, like confidence could rewrite history. Denise stood up slowly and walked toward the monitor beside the judge's bench. Your Honor, she said, we'd like to present archived aerial imagery of the property from county planning records. Then she clicked the remote. First image, 8 years ago, grass. Second image, 7 years ago, grass. Third image, 6 years ago, still grass. Denise kept clicking. Every year the same empty patch of lawn sat there on screen, while Randall's expression slowly started collapsing in real time. You could actually see the moment panic entered his brain. Finally, the construction photos appeared, then the newly poured driveway from 4 years earlier. Denise let the silence hang for a second before saying, the alleged historic access route did not physically exist prior to my client's renovation. Judge Bennett leaned back in his chair and stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he looked directly at Randall. Mr. Pike, he said carefully, are you claiming you established a legal historical easement over grass? Randall started stumbling immediately. Well, people drove through there sometimes, and the judge raised a hand. No. Answer the question. Randall's attorney jumped in trying to salvage things. Your Honor, the issue is habitual community use. Counselor, the judge interrupted. You cannot inherit permanent legal access to a structure that did not yet exist. And man, the silence after that sentence was incredible. It was the kind of silence where you can actually hear somebody's ego cracking. Randall just sat there blinking rapidly, face turning this strange shade of pink. Denise stayed completely expressionless, which somehow made it even better. The judge dismissed the case right there on the spot. Not under review. Not pending. Dismissed. Then he added something I'll never forget. He looked directly at Randall and said, "The court strongly advises against weaponizing false property claims simply because a neighbor establishes boundaries you dislike." Translation? Sit down and stop acting insane. But it got worse for Randall. Because after reviewing the filing, the judge ordered him to cover my legal fees too. Suddenly, that little driveway shortcut became very expensive. Outside the courthouse, Randall stormed past me without speaking while his attorney trailed behind carrying boxes like a man reconsidering every career choice that led him there. Denise turned to me and said, "You know what the scary part is?" "What?" He probably still thinks he was right. And honestly, she was. That's the thing about entitlement. People who live inside it long enough stop recognizing it as entitlement at all. To them, inconvenience becomes injustice. Boundaries become attacks. And anybody who says no becomes the villain. The next morning, I sat on my front porch with coffee just after sunrise, the air still cool from the rain the night before. Around 7:30, I saw Randall's Tahoe coming down the street. Instinctively, he slowed near my driveway like he'd done 1,000 times before. For one tiny second, I honestly wondered if he was still going to do it. Then he stopped, just sat there at the curb. I could practically see the internal debate happening behind the windshield. Finally, he sighed, kept driving to the cul-de-sac at the far end of the block, and made this long, awkward 12-point turn instead. And I'm not gonna lie, watching that felt ridiculously satisfying. Not because I won, not even because he lost, but because for the first time since moving there, he understood something simple. My boundaries were real whether he liked them or not. We barely speak now. Sometimes we nod politely if we happen to check the mail at the same time, but that fake neighborhood friendliness is gone. And honestly, maybe that's for the best. Because some people confuse peace with surrender and kindness with weakness, right up until reality hands them a legal invoice. But I'll say this, part of me still wonders what would have happened if I'd never put that sign up. How far would Randall have pushed things if nobody ever stopped him? And that's what I want to ask you guys. At what point does being neighborly turn into letting people walk all over you? Would you have handled this differently? Or do you think taking him to court was the only way this could have ended? Let me know in the comments, because honestly, neighborhoods can turn into battlefields a lot faster than most people realize.